Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I had a landlord, Marcus, who was pretty much a ghost despite living next door. I lived in this luxury high-rise, around 25 floors, from 2018 to 2023. He was cold and distant personally, but the arrangement worked fine. The rent was reasonable, and we had this understanding: never bother him unless the building was literally on fire. Just handle the small stuff yourself, he'd say during our rare interactions. Broken dishwasher? Replace it. Leaky faucet? Fix it. Just deduct it from the rent. Don't even need receipts. I trust you know what things cost. Everything was smooth until his wife Karen, yeah, fitting name, decided they could make more money by converting the place into an office space. Totally illegal in our zoning. They wanted us out ASAP. "We'll need you out by the end of next month," Marcus told me over text. "We'll refund your last month's rent plus security deposit." I agreed, thinking I was being cooperative. Big mistake. They pulled a complete 180. "The place is completely destroyed," Karen claimed during the walkthrough. "We can't return anything until you fix everything." Their list was ridiculous. Yes, my cats had scratched the leather dining chair legs, and my pull-up bar left 2 small dents in the kitchen doorframe's hardwood. But they went nuts, marking every tiny scratch and dent from 5 years of normal living. "Look at this!" Karen would exclaim, pointing at microscopic marks. "And this! You hung pictures here!" I was swamped with work, but still tried to be reasonable. "Fine, I'll get the chair legs re-leathered and patch the walls," I said. The doorframe damage would come out of my deposit, but I fixed everything else, even replacing window screens that were in better condition than when I moved in. They owed me $3,000 total. Marcus handed me $600. "This is all you get," he said flatly. "I need the rest for repairs. Take it or leave with nothing." I was furious but took the money. What choice did I have? Mrs. Zhang, this older lady down the hall, noticed my mood when I was moving out. I told her everything. Next thing I knew, the whole building knew. Karen got frozen out of her precious mommy group, and people started avoiding Marcus in the elevator. They thought they'd seen the last of me, but I ended up renting a similar unit in the same building instead of moving away. The awkward elevator rides were priceless. A year later, building management called about the heating system in my old unit. I checked. Those doorframe dents were still there. I confronted Marcus in the lobby. "What happened to all those repairs you needed my money for?" "Mind your own business," he snapped. Fast forward to 2023. One night at 3 a.m., I noticed lights on in my old place. The door was wide open and the place was destroyed. Cabinets smashed, walls vandalized with scammer landlord everywhere. And those same doorframe dents still untouched. By then, we had a building-wide WeChat group with about 500 residents. I posted photos of everything. Turns out Marcus had pulled the same deposit scam with the next tenants, who trashed the place before leaving. Other residents started sharing their own horror stories, with video evidence of his negligence, violations, and general nastiness. The consequences were beautiful. He got hit with major fines for public disturbance, property negligence, illegal commercial rental attempts. Best part? Building management blocked all contractor access, so his trashed unit sat empty for 6 months. He lost about $18,000 in potential rent plus fines. Take my $2,400, lose $25,000. Karma's not always quick, but she gets there eventually. The next one is an entitled people's story. Living in a tiny house was always my dream. After years of saving and planning, I finally made it happen in 2021 at age 28. I bought a beautiful 1-acre plot of land in a rural suburban area about 30 minutes outside the city where I work as a software developer. The property was perfect, mostly wooded but with a nice clearing for my tiny house, completely private with no immediate neighbors. I did everything by the book, got all the necessary permits, had the septic system installed, hooked up utilities, and placed my custom-built 400-square-foot tiny house on a permanent foundation. Total investment was around $150,000, including the land, which I owned free and clear with no mortgage. I was living my best minimalist life, debt-free and happy, that is, until the letters started arriving in spring 2022. The first one looked official, certified mail from Pine Valley Estates Homeowners Association. I was confused since I knew for a fact my property wasn't part of any homeowner association. When I bought the land, my real estate agent and title company confirmed it was an independent parcel with no homeowner association or deed restrictions. I opened the letter to find a notice of violation claiming I owed $2,400 in past due homeowner association fees, $200 a month for the past year, plus late fees. It stated my non-conforming dwelling violated homeowner association architectural guidelines and demanded I either remove the tiny house or face legal action. I immediately called my real estate agent and title company. They pulled up all the documentation again, confirming what I already knew. My property was not part of Pine Valley Estates or any other homeowner association. The subdivision was about a quarter mile down the road, but my land was completely separate. I wrote a polite but firm response letter explaining this, included copies of my deed and property records, and sent it certified mail to the homeowner association's management company. I figured that would be the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. 2 weeks later, I got another threatening letter claiming my response was insufficient and demanding payment within 10 days, or they would place a lien on my property and pursue legal action. This time, I called a real estate attorney who specialized in homeowner association disputes. "This is complete nonsense," she said after reviewing everything. "They have zero authority over your property, but some homeowner associations try to bully nearby landowners into joining or paying fees, hoping they'll cave rather than fight it. I'd be happy to send them a cease and desist letter." I paid her $350 to draft and send a strongly worded legal notice explaining they had no jurisdiction over my property and demanding they stop harassing me. Again, I hoped that would resolve things. Nope. The next letter came from their attorney, reiterating their claims and threatening immediate legal action. My lawyer advised me to simply ignore it since they had no case. "Let them waste their money filing a frivolous lawsuit if they want to," she said. "It'll get thrown out and they might face sanctions." Sure enough, in July 2022, I was served with an actual lawsuit. The homeowner association was suing me for over $3,000 in unpaid dues and fees, plus demanding removal of my unauthorized structure. I had to hire my lawyer to file a response and motion to dismiss. The more I looked into Pine Valley Estates Homeowner Association, the more interesting things got. Their president, Karen Wilson, had a history of aggressive behavior, including multiple failed attempts to expand their jurisdiction to nearby properties. She apparently hated that non-homeowner association homes were bringing down property values and tried to force everyone to join. The first hearing was in September 2022. My lawyer systematically demolished their case, presenting clear evidence that my property was not part of their homeowner association and they had no authority over it. The judge seemed annoyed the case was even filed. "Mrs. Wilson," he asked the homeowner association president, "what evidence do you have that this property is part of your association?" "Well, Your Honor, it's clearly visible from our subdivision and that eyesore tiny house impacts our property values," she replied haughtily. "All nearby properties should be required to maintain our standards." "That's not how this works," the judge said. "You can't unilaterally force independent properties to join your homeowner association. This case is dismissed with prejudice." But it wasn't over. The homeowner association appealed the dismissal, dragging things out another few months. Meanwhile, their harassment escalated. They started calling code enforcement with bogus complaints about my property. Someone kept leaving nasty notes on my car. Strange cars would slowly drive by taking pictures. I installed security cameras and documented everything. In January 2023, I caught several homeowner association board members trespassing on my property at night, apparently trying to find violations they could report. The footage clearly showed them sneaking around with flashlights. My lawyer helped me file for a restraining order against the homeowner association leadership and a counterclaim for harassment and legal fees. When presented with the security footage in court, they finally realized they'd gone too far. The judge was furious. He granted the restraining order and awarded me over $15,000 in legal fees. He also referred the homeowner association board members for criminal trespassing charges and reported their attorney to the state bar for filing frivolous litigation. "This conduct is completely unacceptable," he said. "You have engaged in a pattern of harassment and intimidation against someone who is not even under your jurisdiction. It stops now." Karen Wilson and several other board members were forced to resign. The homeowner association had to pay substantial fines and legal fees. My tiny house and I were finally left in peace. The silver lining was that this whole ordeal brought me closer to my actual neighbors, other independent property owners nearby who had also dealt with harassment from Pine Valley Estates Homeowner Association. We formed an informal support network and now get together regularly for cookouts and game nights. Looking back, I'm glad I stood my ground rather than giving in to their intimidation tactics. Living tiny has taught me that sometimes the best things come in small packages, but you have to be willing to fight for what's right. You know what's funny? My neighbor Tom said at our latest cookout. Their precious property values have actually gone down since all this drama became public. Turns out nobody wants to live in an homeowner association run by power-tripping bullies. We all raised our beers to that. As for me, I'm still loving my tiny house life. I've added a nice deck and garden, all fully permitted and homeowner association free. Sometimes less really is more, especially when it comes to nosy neighbors trying to control your property. The whole experience taught me some valuable lessons. Always thoroughly research property restrictions before buying. Keep detailed records of everything. Don't be afraid to stand up to bullies, even if they seem powerful. Get security cameras. They're worth every penny. Build relationships with good neighbors who have your back. A few months ago, I heard Pine Valley Estates was having trouble filling their board positions after the scandal. Apparently, nobody wants to risk personal liability for harassing neighbors. Their dues have gone up to cover all the legal fees and fines. Meanwhile, more tiny houses have actually popped up in the area. Turns out the publicity from my case highlighted how affordable and sustainable they can be. The county even updated their zoning codes to explicitly allow them with reasonable restrictions. Karen Wilson eventually moved away, reportedly telling neighbors she couldn't stand looking at that tiny house anymore. We threw a block party to celebrate. I still get the occasional nasty look from homeowner association members when I drive past their subdivision, but the harassment has completely stopped. My lawyer keeps the restraining order renewal paperwork ready just in case, but so far it hasn't been needed. The new homeowner association board seems to have learned their lesson. They even sent me a formal letter of apology, though I suspect their insurance company required it. I framed it and hung it in my tiny house bathroom, all 25 square feet of it. 1 year later, my property value has actually increased substantially thanks to all the improvements I've made. The garden is thriving, I've added solar panels, and there's a wait list of people wanting to tour my tiny house for inspiration. Most importantly, I can enjoy my home in peace without worrying about arbitrary rules or harassment. Sometimes the biggest victories come in the smallest packages. The security cameras are staying, though. You never know when another Karen might move into the neighborhood. The legal battle itself was quite fascinating in retrospect. When we first went to court, the homeowner association's attorney tried some pretty creative arguments. He claimed my property was historically part of the original Pine Valley development because it was once owned by the same developer back in the 1970s. My lawyer destroyed that argument with the actual property records. Your Honor, the parcel was explicitly excluded from the homeowner association subdivision plat when it was created. It was sold separately in 1980, long before Pine Valley Estates was even incorporated. There has never been any homeowner association covenant or restriction on this property. The homeowner association's attorney then tried arguing that because I used the main road that ran past Pine Valley to access my property, I was somehow benefiting from their maintenance and therefore should pay dues. The judge wasn't having it. Counselor, that's a county-maintained public road. The homeowner association has no ownership or maintenance responsibility for it. Next argument? They didn't have one. But that didn't stop them from filing multiple amended complaints, each more desperate than the last. One actually claimed that because rainwater from my property might eventually drain toward their subdivision, downhill, I was somehow subject to their jurisdiction. So, by that logic, my lawyer countered, everyone upstream in the entire watershed should pay homeowner association dues. That's absurd. The real turning point came during discovery when we obtained the homeowner association's internal emails and board meeting minutes. They revealed this wasn't just overzealous enforcement, it was a deliberate campaign of harassment. We need to make an example of this tiny house owner, Karen had written. If we let one person get away with ignoring our standards, soon this whole area will be filled with these mobile home-type structures. Property values will plummet. Another board member had responded, maybe if we make his life difficult enough, he'll sell and move away. We could try to buy the property and incorporate it into the homeowner association. My lawyer's eyes lit up when she saw these emails. This is pure gold, she said. They're admitting to intentionally harassing you to try to force a sale. That's legally and ethically wrong on so many levels. The trespassing incident was the final nail in their coffin. My security cameras caught Karen and 2 other board members prowling around my property at 11:30 p.m. using flashlights to peer in my windows and take pictures. When confronted with the footage, they claimed they were just investigating potential code violations. At night, on private property, without permission, the judge asked incredulously, "That's criminal trespassing, plain and simple." The criminal charges were eventually pleaded down to misdemeanors with fines and community service, but the civil penalties were substantial. Beyond paying my legal fees, the homeowner association had to issue a public retraction and apology, add explicit language to their bylaws prohibiting harassment of non-homeowner association properties, undergo mandatory training on property law and homeowner association limitations, establish an ethics committee with non-board members, set up an independent review process for complaints. The whole saga made the local news, which led to other people coming forward with similar stories about Pine Valley Estates' homeowner association's bullying tactics. The county commissioners even launched an investigation into their practices. I later learned that Karen's crusade against my tiny house wasn't just about property values. Her adult daughter had wanted to buy my land back when it was for sale, but couldn't afford it. Karen apparently felt I had stolen it by outbidding her daughter. That explains the personal vendetta, my lawyer said when we discovered this. But it makes their actions even more inappropriate. She was using her homeowner association position to pursue a private grudge. The aftermath transformed the neighborhood dynamics. Pine Valley residents started questioning everything their homeowner association did. Many were furious that their dues had been wasted on frivolous legal action. There was even talk of dissolving the homeowner association completely, though that didn't pass. Instead, they completely overhauled their governance. The new board is much more reasonable. They focus on actually maintaining their common areas instead of harassing outsiders. Their new president even asked me to give a presentation about tiny house living at their community center. I declined politely. While I appreciate the olive branch, I prefer keeping my distance. My non-homeowner association neighbors and I have our own thriving community now. We help each other with projects, share garden produce, and celebrate our freedom to paint our houses whatever color we want. The experience also inspired me to get involved in local politics. I now serve on the County Planning Commission, helping craft sensible zoning regulations that protect property rights while ensuring responsible development. We've approved several more tiny house communities. My property has become something of a local landmark. People often slow down to admire my garden or wave hello. I've even given tours to architecture students studying alternative housing. The irony isn't lost on me. The homeowner association's attempt to force me out only made my tiny house more visible and popular. Last month, I ran into Karen's daughter at the grocery store. To my surprise, she apologized for her mother's behavior. "I never wanted any of that drama," she said. "I was disappointed about not getting the property, but what Mom did was wrong. I'm actually saving up to build my own tiny house now, just not anywhere near Pine Valley Estates." We had a good laugh about that. I gave her some contacts for tiny house builders and wished her luck. Looking back, standing up to the homeowner association was stressful and expensive initially, but absolutely worth it. Not just for me, but for everyone who's faced similar intimidation. Sometimes you have to fight the big battles to protect the small things that matter. My tiny house stands proud and free, a testament to perseverance and property rights. The garden is blooming, solar panels gleaming, and not a single homeowner association-approved color swatch in sight. And those security cameras? They've captured nothing but wildlife and friendly neighbors for months now, but they're staying up, along with the framed court order in my bathroom. Some things are just too precious to take for granted, even in a tiny house. The next one is a petty revenge story. Back in college, I worked at a gas station. We worked for cash under the table, so it was pretty loose. Another quirk was that we did not clock in and out, but were paid for each 8-hour shift. I worked 4 p.m. midnight and had a passing friendship with the guy who worked the overnight shift. We attended the same college and had some classes together. Let's call him Dave. Dave had a problem showing up on time. Generally, it was 5 to 10 minutes, and we were friends, so I didn't mind too much, but I took to calling his house 15 minutes before my shift ended just to make sure he wasn't dragging his ass. He lived about 15 minutes away. Because I was so affable about him being a few minutes late, he would basically show up at 12:10 on the regular, and it really started to get on my nerves. I wasn't being paid for this time, and he was. One night after a particularly horrible shift, I called Dave's house and a mutual friend answered. I asked her if Dave was there and she said yes, but he was in the middle of a game and couldn't come to the phone. Not wanting to vent my rage at her, I just said thanks and hung up. Dave rolled in at 12:30, his latest yet, and I let him have it. I reminded him that he was getting paid for work I was doing and it was completely unfair. He acted kind of annoyed and interrupted me with, "Just let me know what I owe you on payday." I came up with the idea on the spot and agreed to his terms. I stopped calling him to remind him to leave his apartment and jotted down every minute he was late. The time added up quickly because without my constant haranguing, he was coming to work even later, generally 15 to 20 minutes late. I was always cheerful and friendly when he finally deigned to come to work and never mentioned him being late again. Several months later, I went to pick up my pay and my weekly schedule. It was printed out, as this was in the olden days, and Dave was at the counter. "Oh, hey," I said. "I was hoping to run into you. I need to tell you what you owe me." He rolled his eyes and reached for his wallet. Oh, no, you misunderstand," I said, sliding my printed schedule across the counter. "I don't want your money. I want your time. You owe me 16 hours of time. Which 2 shifts of mine do you want to take this week?" He tried to argue, but I showed him the records I had been keeping. Every shift, up to the minute. He tried to say he's work for me next week, but I wasn't having it. "I didn't get to choose when I had to work for you. You're lucky I'm giving you some kind of choice, but it has to be this week." Dave worked 7 shifts that week, including a double. He was never late again. The next one is a malicious compliances story. I work at a gas station in Oregon, with half the pumps being self-serve and half being mini-service, which means that we're there to pump your gas for you, but not obligated to do anything else like wash your windshield. But we do when we're asked, to be nice. There's this lady that comes in almost every day and gets like $5 or $10 worth of gas, asks us to wash her windshield, and never tips. She's really weird about it, like it's her little power trip. Last time she was in, it was raining, and she still smugly asked me to wash her windshield. And being hardcore customer service guy, I did, but then I thought twice about it after the fact. I go that length for nice folks, but she's not nice, she's idiot and whiny and weird. So windshield lady comes in today and hands me $9 for gas, and then as usual asks me to wash her windshield with a smug look on her face. I said I would, but then by the time I got back out, there were a good 8 cars on the pumps. I told her, "I'm sorry, I can't do your windshield right now, it's too busy." Well, she gets really snotty with me and has me stop the pump, which means that since she paid cash, she needs her change. "Okay, you'll get your change." I went inside and told my coworker I need the change on pump 2, but make sure to vend extra pennies from the safe and put 50 of them in there loose. He looked at me like I was crazy, but then I explained who it was for, and so he gladly handed me over the change. By the way, we have to wait in line inside the attached convenience store with other customers to get change for gas, 'cause our pump guy often doesn't have their own till open for a shift. So, as I was standing in line to get windshield lady's change, she came inside and was death-glaring our other customers and then must have seen me waiting and went back out to her car. She was already getting snotty with me the moment I walked back out to her car. So put the $3 bills in her hand and then an absolute cascading assload of pennies and a few nickels on them. "Sorry, we're short on silver," I said. The look on her face, that was the most satisfying use of pennies ever. She sounded like Mr. Lumbergh Milton from Office Space. She was still stammering when she was driving away and I didn't listen to or identify a single word she said, hoping this will discourage her from coming back. But if it doesn't, then we will once again have a shortage of silver change. Because alas, that is the economy that we are in. Times are tough. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.